NBA insider and my good friend Brandon Scoop B. Robinson decided it was worth his time to give me a little more time to talk some basketball. What's up, brother? How you feeling?
Do that. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. If you want more basketball conversations like this, welcome to the Basketball Society podcast. If you're new, Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, NBA insider. We're gonna get into a few topics. I want to start with SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and OKC. What are you noticing about how people are, uh, how they're understanding SGA and how he's really rising as one of the top players in the league? And what's your feeling on how confident and how respectful people are? And when I say people, just people around the league, maybe players, or just what's the general energy around SGA and OKC right now?
Well, first of all, he's a 6'6" point guard that can score, can distribute, and I think plays in a smaller market. And I think a lot of times the national audience pays attention to other teams that are more national. And I think Oklahoma is in a situation where they've been playing well. They've just picked up where they left off from last season. I think the biggest difference for Oklahoma this season is they added two pieces at the uh, free agency and the offseason points that added to their team. One in trading to get Alex Caruso, who I believe will be very beneficial to that team going into the playoffs, defending twos, threes, and ones in the playoffs. That's one. And then two, bringing in Isaiah Hartenstein from the New York Knicks. And spent some time with Isaiah towards the beginning of the season. And he really has gelled with this team the right way and really didn't have to add or subtract. He just came in being himself. So I think when you look at the fact that they're winning and the fact that they have the best record at the point of this recording in the NBA's Western Conference, it's hard to ignore that team. I think the same can be said about the Cleveland Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference, where it's not just Donovan Mitchell's team. I think adding a coach in Kenny Atkinson and also that trade with the Atlanta Hawks at the trade deadline continues to do well. I think also the play of Ty Jerome has helped Cleveland exponentially as well.
Yes.
But I also think Evan Mobley has been playing consistently this season as well. So I think it's a coming of age for both teams, not named Lakers, not named Warriors, not named Steph, not named LeBron, not named Anthony Edwards, although Anthony Edwards is still a rising star in this league and will continue to flourish as the time goes on. But I think when you look at the Oklahoma City Thunder and you look at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I'll tell you that across the league, there are other players and teams that take notice. And the talk in NBA locker rooms is that Shai is the NBA's most valuable player. He's the most valuable player for his team. He's the most valuable player across the league. And it really starts on the inside. I spent some time with the Thunder early in the season, and the vibes in the locker room are what are very, very interesting. You walk to Jalen Williams, I, not E, Jalen Williams, and I asked him just about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's importance to that team. And he says, without a doubt, he's the MVP. He should have been the MVP last season, but he realizes that there's a lot of conversations and politics that go into the league before you are the MVP. And I've even having conversation with the other Jalen Williams, who normally on the road sits next to him in the NBA locker room, in the visitors' locker room, and we were having a conversation about sneakers, and Jalen Williams wears Adidas, and oftentimes he wears the James Harden's Adidas sneakers. And we were comparing the sevens and the nines. And Jalen Williams said to me that those Harden sneakers remind him of Nike foams. And while we were talking, uh, I'll edit the conversation, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander essentially just said, you know, talking about Air Jordans, he's a Converse guy. He has his own signature shoe, and he kind of was giving his take on where the Jordan brand and the wearers of those sneakers, whether that be Luka Doncic and Zion Williamson and others, and where that direction is going and how it's more of an open market. It's not just a foregone conclusion that said sneaker company is the king or not, but that there's so much more space and creative space out there. And that kind of ties into who Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is, a guy that wears Converse, a guy that has a partnership with Skims, a guy that which is unorthodox. Of course, Kardashian wear and the NBA did a partnership there, and Shai has always been forward thinking and fashion conscious and as well. So I think he's different. I think he has a flair, and I think I don't think I know. The other guys on that team have shared with me. Not only is he their point guard, he's their style coordinator, swag coach. He knows his value. And the cool thing about Oklahoma, having been around that team for the last couple of years, visiting Oklahoma, spending time with that team, they're locked in. They share fashion advice, and you kind of see those levels of interactions mirror itself in post-game interviews and just the way that those guys are cool on the court as well as off the court.
Yeah, that is interesting. It's crazy you bring up the James Harden sneakers on Jalen Williams. I have this theory that he's kind of the new James Harden on OKC in that he's kind of the Harden to SGA's Westbrook in that kind of way. And in that I think he's just as important for them to make a legitimate run. I think he's that good. And I think he's so good and is going to continue to be so good that they might run into the same situation where hopefully they pay him and keep him and don't let him walk in free agency like Harden did to Houston. But I almost see like the same thing starting to play out because when I see Jalen Williams running that thing at the point of attack, running pick and rolls, heady, strong, able to score in the paint, outside the paint. He's the real deal. And the two of them should stick together as long as they can.
Yeah, Sam Presti's got a good problem on his hands. I think that the Russell Westbrook and James Harden and Kevin Durant pairing, building from the draft. Um, he's had on the job experience dealing with that going from Seattle to Oklahoma, and building homegrown talent. If I can make a baseball reference, it reminds me somewhat of not just Oklahoma in the NBA, but also the New York Yankees in the early to mid 90s, where you had the homegrown talent of Derek Jeter, Bernie Williams, and Paul O'Neill, and some of those guys that just were homegrown, brought in through Double A, Triple A, minor league baseball, and then ultimately making World Series appearances, representing the New York Yankees and building that dynasty. Ultimately, going outside of the realm of homegrown and bringing in the Alex Rodriguez's, or bringing in the Gary Sheffields, or bringing in the Cecil Fielders and more. Oklahoma's in a similar situation where they have the homegrown talent of not just Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Jalen Williams, but also Lou Dort. And also, Dort has shared with me throughout the course of the last couple of seasons how much both he and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander playing for Team Canada, of course, Dort being from Montreal and say Shai Gilgeous-Alexander being from Toronto, how much that chemistry, that built-in chemistry of playing for the same national team, helped prior to the season, did the Olympics, and then coming back and paying dividends going into this season. But I think when you look at the Oklahoma City going with that Yankees theme and going elsewhere outside of the homegrown talent, that's where you bring in via trade the Alex Caruso's, the Isaiah Hartensteins, and more. I think Oklahoma is on an upward trajectory where they did not need a big market in order to be successful. But as I say that about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that he was brought in earlier in his career via trade with the Los Angeles Clippers, originally drafted by the Clippers in the Paul George trade. That trade seemingly looking like it benefited the Oklahoma City Thunder, and getting SGA there and sending Paul George to the Clippers, where ultimately they paired him with Kawhi Leonard. But on the Oklahoma side, I do think that they've been battle tested. I think really going against the eventual Western Conference champions that were the Dallas Mavericks gave them a on-the-job training on how to compete. And I think the Western Conference is still pretty competitive, particularly with the Lakers retooling, LeBron James dealing with groin injuries, but ramping up his progress and coming back. That injury a little different than what happened in 2019. But I do think that the Lakers are one of those teams, as well as the Golden State Warriors, West, and even the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are finding their groove at this point in the second half of the season, that will compete heartily with the Oklahoma City Thunder in the playoffs.
Who does SGA's game remind you of?
A couple of different people. I've asked different people their thoughts on it, and I've reflected on that, and also come up with my own concoction of inspirations. I think there's definitely the zigzagging dribbling that is Allen Iverson, uh, a taller Jamal Crawford, um, height of a point guard like Penny Hardaway, the court vision, being able to see above the floor.
Hmm.
I think there's a flair for the fashion that's somewhere between Walt Clyde Frazier, Allen Iverson, um, and himself. And I also think that he's himself because he's Toronto uh, born, and I think that there are some, even though he doesn't play like him, there are some Vince Carter influences of just watching him being a star in a city that's also part of a country in Toronto, Canada. But I think he is. I think he is a mixture of different people.
Yeah, I would agree. I think part of why he is so unique right now, and I love players like this where you can just tell guys just can't figure him out. Like you see guys out there trying to guard him, they can't tell if he's going slow, if he's going fast, if he's going low, if he's going high. Now he's getting the foul bait conversation. That's where I think he's got a little Harden in him too. I think a lot of players in this era have picked up from what James Harden was doing, especially in those years in Houston. I feel like he revolutionized the step back, the side step. And you see so many more players adding that to their footwork. And I see some of that with him as well.
One thing that I find in talking to NBA level players, college level players, and high school level players is how much Paul George has influenced this.
Well, they think they think he is the best thing walking. They love them some Paul George now.
Yeah, and I really began to see that. Of course, that viral moment with Brandon Miller a couple of years ago, where I asked him, about the GOAT conversation in a different way, more so along the lines of just being around Michael Jordan when he was going through his draft process, and then, talking about LeBron James, and then talking about Paul George, and him saying Paul George was his GOAT, not that he was the GOAT, but that was his GOAT. And then I started really asking high school players that, and college players, and they say to me, or they relay to me, that imagine Kyrie at that height, he'd be the same person. And that was interesting to 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 think about, specifically because you and I, coming from a small Division III school, you, for example, had a point guard on your team that was a defensive stopper that was about 5'10", and I often heard people say, imagine if that particular point guard was 6'2", 6'3", defensive minded. Uh, he probably would be D3. And that's when I really started hearing those kind of conversations, and kind of transferred it over to the pro game, and how people view Paul George's influence, Kyrie Irving's influence, and how Steph Curry and LeBron James are definitely the model citizens of the game, but kind of counterculturally where they fit in. And Paul George's name is the name that I hear a lot.
Yeah, and I've said about Paul George, and it's very simple in basketball terms. Like I think just nowadays with the diversity of talent, the range of talent that young hoopers and fans have a chance to watch and study nowadays, it's so broad. Like there's so many dudes that are just flat out nice. And a lot of the young players coming up aren't caring as much about ring culture and legacy and all. They just want to know, do you get 30 and do you look good doing it? That's where aesthetic matters. And me as somebody who um I'm a Kobe Mike guy. And, if the Lord blesses me to have children one day, and if they are interested in basketball, we will start with Kobe and Mike. However, they will know about Paul George, James Harden, Allen Iverson. Like we will run through the gamut of just talent for you to look at. And like we're talking about Shea, like pull from all these different guys, not just the ones who won the guys who won championships. Like there's too much talent to not be able to appreciate even guys like Paul George and James Harden.
Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment quite a bit because, Kobe Kobe had the advantage of watching Mike. Mike created his own style while also obviously being influenced by the Dr. J's of the world, Connie Hawkins, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and others. But I'd be remiss to mention that, as much as, when you talk about showing tape to young kids or the next generation of Michael, Kobe, Allen Iverson, I'm still gonna go with that countercultural theme. I still think that guys like Jamal Mashburn are supremely underrated. I still think that what Jalen Rose did as a point forward, not just in high school, but on the Indiana Pacers and the Denver Nuggets, really should be dissected a lot. And I also think that when you look at guys like Bob McAdoo, as
Mm.
well as Lamar Odom, before there was Lamar Odom, there was a Bob McAdoo. And I also think that when you look at point guards, as much as we talk about Steph Curry, we talk about Magic Johnson, I really think guys like Terrell Brandon should be dissected in the
Mhm.
hand of basketball. And the fact that a lot of his competitors, admired his tenacity on the court. I think guys like Sam Cassell are playing the mid range, but also just being a court.
You know who was one of my guys? You appreciate this. Antoine Walker.
Always,
Twan.
always, always.
Cold. Shimmy. Come on now. Come on now. Shimmy.
But here's the thing. I feel like in the era of basketball where, within the last 10 to 15 years, we talk about guys like Anthony Bennett. You still have to pay homage to not just Antoine Walker, but Corliss Williamson,
Hmm.
Larry Johnson, both at UNLV and during his time with the Hornets, which I think gets overlooked by his time with the Knicks. But I also think Clarence Weatherspoon
Hmm.
is another guy also, just that those descendants, if you will, of Charles Barkley. And I think Zion Williamson, as much as we talk about his weight and we talk about his ability, I think it's lazy to just compare him to, a Charles Barkley. I think that there's a level of his game that mirrors not only Sean Kemp, but also Zach LaVine, just his ability to get to the basket.
Hmm.
Uh, but I also think that we have to be careful with um, putting players' skill sets in boxes because we live in a positionless basketball era now. Um, like I think when we look at Luka, it was easy to compare him to Tony Kukoc or Detlef Schrempf. But I've always seen different variants of LeBron as well as James Harden as well as the bit of Kukoc. But I think that's just because he's European and he's white. And the same with Zion because he has a little weight to him. It's easy to say Charles Barkley without fully dissecting his game. And I'm being respectful to those guys in the way that I say that. But I do think that we just live in an era of basketball where there are so many slashes to people's games.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And that's why talking to good old basketball historians like you give us even greater context and understanding for how to really break down people's games. And you don't know where you are unless you know where you've been. How about that?
And where you about to go?
Say that. So where we're about to go next is to New York City, big market. Went from small market OKC to big market Knicks. And I am not a Tom Thibodeau hater. I'm not a hater of anybody. I'm not against anybody. I do have my own kind of philosophy and understanding of the kind of basketball and culture that works, and even just observing what works and what's happening in the NBA itself, the style of basketball. Tibbs has had the grit and grind kind of philosophy and culture, and he's still got guys complaining about minutes. He's got this stigma of running guys ragged, playing them high minutes, still kind of like an old school kind of feel and approach. Although I think he's made some strides just from afar. It seems like he's made strides in New York with kind of just evolving a little bit, I think, even with the kind of players that he has now. But I still think his nature is defensive culture, gritty, grinded out. And again, I don't advocate for people to be let go or fired or anything. But when I look at the league, Boston has a Joe Mazzulla, young, offensive, forward thinking guy, right? What Steve Kerr did with the Warriors. Like, I mean, there's a trend here happening, and Thibs is not necessarily the trend towards championship culture in the NBA right now. Do you think that is fair on any level?
I think as old school as you are, you still have to consistently reinvent yourself. And I think for Tom Thibodeau, uh, as many years as he's put in as a head coach period in the NBA, he's had to do that. I think being a longtime assistant at different stops with the Knicks and then ultimately the Boston Celtics and then finding his way to his own team with the Chicago Bulls, it was a consistent reinvention. In my opinion, when I looked at Derrick Rose's injury, I think that was kind of a wake-up call, not just for him, but also for many coaches and players across the league of why you can't overly use players in a sense of you got to give them rest. I have no problem with playing time, but it's finding that balance between rest and play. And I think as his career has progressed, I felt as though a combination of what I know and what I've observed that in Minnesota that theory was held true, but more so on the lines of managing veteran stars and younger players. I think in Minnesota, Jimmy Butler was a case study in um, having a blue collar player who feels that they should be treated like a star, still performing like a blue collar player while still being a star at the same time. Jimmy is a very special case, and I think going from Minnesota to the Knicks, I, I think the you'll look back in the next couple of months and say that the Jalen Brunson injury that happened recently probably was the best thing that happened for the Knicks because the Knicks were so ball dominant with Jalen Brunson and even with Julius Randle when Julius Randle was there, that even when Julius Randle left, Brunson was more ball dominant and
Yeah,
still successful, but that wear and tear on his body took its toll. And I believe that that trade with the Minnesota Timberwolves between the Wolves and the Knicks benefited both teams. But for the Knicks, I believe that Mikal Bridges grew into the defensive juggernaut and just complimentary star player that he was accustomed to being in Phoenix. And that's carried over into his role with the Knicks. Concurrently, Carl Towns was the second option and has been playing like the second option that the Knicks always needed. And in these growing pains, guys are finding ways to still be efficient while Jalen Brunson is on the mend. And I think that's a good problem to have.
I agree, and I do think that when you have your star out, having a culture like Tibbs has established is really what helps you. Because I think they just have that mentality. It comes with a mentality and a toughness. That's why Josh Hart works well there. But even going back to what I said about when they picked up Mikal Bridges and they still had Julius Randle, because I did a reaction, I did an episode on the show, and they still had. So I'm thinking of the Knicks team with DiVincenzo, with Randle. They had just got Mikal Bridges, and I'm like, Tibbs is gonna have to figure this thing out. This is looking like a mess. I mean, not a mess, but Randall's gonna have to figure out Bridges. Yeah, defensive guy, but going back to his Phoenix days and even in Brooklyn, he was starting to look like a 20-point per game scorer, like a legit 3 level scoring guy. He was starting to trend upward in his offensive skill set and not just be a defensive guy. So him coming to the Knicks, I'm like, well, that's a big opportunity. You're playing with your boy Brunson. You're playing with your boy Hart. So you should have all the confidence in the world. Randall's still there. So you guys are going to have to figure this thing out. The Villanova Knicks plus Randall plus whatever. And I'm like, well, they don't have to figure it out. Tibbs has to figure it out. He's going to have to figure out this because this is now, again, we're in an offensive culture of basketball. And now you've got offensive weapons that now you have to show what you can do with this. And I think largely on personnel, like Brunson's going to score points. Like that's just who he is at this point. But when you look at how they play, like, dude, look at what Redick is doing in LA. Like you look at the trends of like the teams that are not just fun to watch, but that are also successful. You got to have some kind of like forward thinking. You don't have to get like super creative and experimental. I'm not saying you got to be the Kyle Shanahan of basketball. I'm just saying like there's clearly a trend happening here, and I've always been questionable of Thibs in this offensive culture and era being a largely defensive guy. Like what roster? I mean, these are some of the best rosters he's had, in my opinion.
I think basketball in 2025, it's become a byproduct of what basketball in 2020 was. If you look at 2020, when we were in the height of the COVID pandemic, we were talking about Mike D'Antoni, we were talking about Doc Rivers, we were talking about Eric Spoelstra as preeminent coaching names. But at some point, respectfully to those gentlemen that I named, there has to be a the next generation. I mean, even when you know, I know he's on the mend as well, but when you look at Greg Popovich and having a stroke and getting better, and I think sometimes we just lean on names and think that names are going to always carry you. And I'll use a perfect example. I remember when the Knicks hired Larry Brown after his stint with the Detroit Pistons, and they thought that because Larry Brown had championship aspirations and because he was Brooklyn born and raised and he was coming home, that that was going to fix problems. And in that era of basketball, you had any iteration of Stephon Marbury, David Lee, Jamal Crawford, Nate Robinson, Trevor Ariza, Steve Francis on that squad, who surprisingly, I think in today's NBA, that's what that looks like. Back when they were playing, you didn't play three guards. You played two guards, and you playing a more of a leaner style of basketball. So I think in today's basketball era, where you mentioned the JJ Redicks, as well as the Joe Mazzulas, and even I'll add to that list Taylor Jenkins in Memphis.
Yeah.
You're getting guys who have been respected in the college ranks or who were stars in their own right when they played. It's more of a quick turnaround between retirement and playing. Jason Kidd, also another example of that. Even Monty Williams, to a degree, you're seeing less of the names and you're seeing more of the results. You're seeing that in Charlotte with their head coach, where they're trying to build something. They've been trying to build something for a while, and hopefully it finally bears fruit. But you're seeing a lot of guys who have been respected assistant coaches across the league getting head coaching jobs, or they've been respected players who are now finding their way as head coaches in the league.
Every time I think, look at just the Knicks and think about Brunson and what their ceiling is, what their potential, I can't help but go back to Becky Hammon's comment, which for anyone who loves Jalen Brunson, I know that that stung to hear it that way, but she had a point in what she was what she was saying, and I can't help but think between the head coach and again, I think they could use another guy. I think they could use like I thought Mikal Bridges could become was on his way to becoming almost like an elite wing guy in the league. And I thought if he was at that level and ready to be at that level, apparently his jump shot, he's been doing experiments with his jump shot and changing the thing up. And he seems fine now, but like he was on a trajectory that I think, not to say he regressed, but he's clearly not a 20-point per game guy right now, like he was in Brooklyn.
But you also got to remember something. You talk about Mikal Bridges in Brooklyn. Mikal Bridges was a piece added in a trade for Kevin Durant from Phoenix, and he was coming off of six-man duties. And when he left Phoenix, you went from being a complimentary six-man to being
Yeah, he
the
was the number
man.
one option. Yeah.
Then going from that to being like number three or number four in New York with the
But he
Knicks, and
could,
then
but Brand, he could have been number two if he wanted to. He was on the pat. When he was coming in, my reaction was, okay, he's gonna get shots. He based on what I've been seeing. Why are you three behind? Why are you? I mean, maybe behind Julius Randle, maybe now it's Cat. But like, my thing was like he should have had a better case for being like even number two. He
I
was on
think
his way.
respectfully, I think you kind of answered your question. Like I think he got traded to the Knicks around the day before the draft, and Julius Randle was the 4-5. And then Julius Randle got traded, and then Cat came in and dominated. I think we knew
Yep.
Cat was going to be effective. I don't think we knew he was going to be that effective.
Oh,
And I think we're seeing things that he dusted off from his bag that we hadn't seen since his early days in Minnesota.
facts.
I think, and so I think it's that plus you also are sharing minutes between both Brunson and OG Anunoby.
Right. True.
Anunoby is the chess piece that's, I don't want to say it's prohibitive. I just think that a defining role, he's had three different roles on three different teams. If we're to say he had three different roles on three different teams, was his role in Villanova his real role? Was his role in Phoenix his real role? Was his role in Brooklyn the real role? Or is the role in New York what it is now? I kind of feel like I'm not comparing them, but I kind of feel like that's the kind of conversations we were having with Ben Simmons early on. Was he a starting point guard that was going to be the next LeBron or Magic, or was he going to be the complementary piece next to Kevin and Kyrie?
Hmm.
Or is he in the role he's supposed to be with the Clippers? I think it's a similar dichotomy there.
I can't help but look at coaching, and I'm not trying to blame it on Tibbs, but in my opinion, when a guy like Mikal Bridges was playing the way he was playing in Brooklyn, if he goes to a head coach like a JJ Redick or Joe Mazzulla or an offensive minded coach and that staff is offensive minded and his jump shot isn't looking the way I saw it look on his first day of practice at the Knicks. They are making an effort to be like, hey, we want you taking 15 plus shots. We want you playing like you played in Brooklyn in moderation, but like we want that version of you that's been evolving, and we don't just want you as a 3-and-D guy. But I respect him so much because to your point, he can be somewhat of a chameleon. He can still score the ball. He can still hit shots. He's an excellent defender. So as a player, and that's what I said when I reacted when they got him. He's going to do what it takes to win. He's a winning player. He's rangy. He's long. He can do so many different things to help them compete, and that's what he's going to do.
He plays like he played in Phoenix, they're golden.
Agreed. I think yeah, because in Phoenix, look, he started to come on even more in Phoenix each year. I'm
Think,
like,
think about that. In Phoenix, you played alongside a point guard in Chris Paul. You played along a superstar two or
yeah,
three in Devin Booker,
yeah,
and then you played alongside an Aiton, who was more of a mobile big man,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
You look at the Knicks situation. You're playing in a Knicks to an All-Star in Jalen Brunson, who was your teammate in Villanova. You're playing alongside a Karl Anthony Towns, who is a mobile big man, but more of a hybrid mobile big man in comparison to Aiton. I think we're still figuring out what Aiton is going to be. And then you're looking at option three, whether that be OG. Um, I guess that would be OG. I
yeah,
think not comparing OG to Devin Booker, but you've been in situations versus when you're in Brooklyn, you're playing alongside Claxton, who as a big man who was more defensive minded than a scoring big. You were playing alongside Cam Thomas, who the Nets couldn't figure out where to put him, but has arguably been the best player on their team for years. And then you're playing alongside what? Cam Johnson as well. Like you're in a situation where younger team in Brooklyn versus experienced team in Phoenix that was a championship appearing team. And even playing in Villanova, where you went to the national championship, I mirror myself after Phoenix and Villanova. And I think that, again, Brunson being away from the fold is going to boost his confidence. And as long as Karl Anthony Towns stays healthy, I think it's golden because the big question that has been asked is who is the second option at point guard for the Knicks for Brunson, whether he's playing or whether he's hurt?
right.
And I think by committee, they're doing it.
Sorry to break up this video. Just wanted to pop in real quick and say thank you for watching and supporting. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe to Basketball Society and stay tapped in with more of our basketball content on YouTube. I want to switch gears quickly to Kevin Durant, and uh, I want to talk about you had some really good reporting about Houston having him at really at the top of their list and looking to pursue him this summer, and even just the fact that Brandon, you know and I mean I don't want to spend too much time on Phoenix. I really want to get into like what you're feeling, um what you're hearing and what you think even just makes sense for Kevin Durant in this what should be, the last part of his career. I guess I'll start by just asking you, like, does it feel to you like, Phoenix is definitely done. Like it's a wrap in Phoenix for Kevin because I mean, it's people. I feel like basketball fans are getting really distraught and like depressed over this. Just the fact that we can't see KD. LeBron got Luca, Steph got Jimmy Butler. They're good now. KD's like, and I mean, he's got Devin Booker, but the whole thing has just gotten so chaotic. They've lost like 15 of 17 games or something. I mean, it's horrible.
I feel like Phoenix has been in an interesting space ever since they got rid of Chris Paul, and it's carried over. You can't be a successful team without having a point guard, and that is heady, so to speak. Just a floor general, a guy who commands and demands a lot from his teammates, and it carries over. This is a team that 4 years ago um, represented the Western Conference in the NBA Finals, and had they waited a little bit before executing to get Kevin Durant, they could have stayed in position to keep KD, Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and others together. And I believe that that team would have created nightmares for the NBA's Western Conference even now. But I think that there are a couple of factors that make things interesting. I think number one, even dating back to when Chris Paul was there, Monty Williams and DeAndre Ayton had a lot of issues. I think it was this young, old school versus young person thing, and I can speak on it because I know that Monty Williams commands a lot from big men. This goes back to his days as head coach with the Pelicans, or the Hornets, rather. I know that he and Anthony Davis were going at it left and right, to the point that Anthony Davis's father, Anthony Davis Sr., was quarreling with Monty Williams. And, I was told, I've never publicly said this, I'll share this with you, that, it got to a point where Anthony Davis Sr. invited Monty Williams outside for a fight. And they squabbled up. I'll leave it at that. When you look at that situation with the Suns, I think it goes back to just the way Monty Williams, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, and all those figures were handled. And then the following year, years where you brought in uh, Frank Vogel, and a lot of the Suns' success or lack thereof was blamed on Kevin Durant. And I'm told that it wasn't a KD issue. It was more just um, a front office culture that was imploding for some time. And from all indications, the basketball operations side of the Phoenix Suns only has about two former players in it, in Rex Chapman and James Jones. James Jones, of course, who's the general manager of that team. And you also have a new majority owner in Matt Ishbia, who had lofty expectations, and we're still looking to see what's going on there. Mike Budenholzer was, of course, brought in, and there were people who questioned the hire. I won't dog Coach Bud, but I'll just say that there have been just differences in philosophy, and a belief that maybe they should have stuck it out with Vogel for one more season before ultimately just getting rid of him. And the Suns had aspirations of doing something great. Again, going back to my reporting over at scoopy.com, I made mention of the fact that both Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, prior to being traded from Brooklyn to their respective teams, they wanted to find a way to both get to the Phoenix Suns, and it didn't happen that way. Kevin was, of course, shipped to Phoenix, and Kyrie went to Dallas, and there was a difference in philosophy, namely with James Jones, who knows Kyrie fairly well, and didn't want him on the team. And there was a portion of whether Ayton would find his way to Brooklyn, and Kai and Kevin are at a different point. Last time I sat down with you, we discussed a healthy Kyrie Irving as well as Kevin Durant, assumedly healthy, potentially finding their way to each other in Phoenix, or rather, excuse me, let me rewind that back, finding their way in Dallas. And it didn't happen that Kyrie stayed healthy. He has an ACL injury that may carry over to the next season. And, there were conversations last summer about Dallas and the Houston Rockets as a team, as the two majority teams that could find their way to acquiring Kevin Durant at season's end. And at the trade deadline, and the Washington Wizards did reach out to the Phoenix Suns about Kevin Durant. And, from everything that was intimated to me, anytime you entertain or at least accept a phone call from another team, people believe that that means that a trade is going to happen. A lot of times these guys are golf buddies, or they're grabbing dinner together at various functions, and they're catching up, but they're also thinking about the possibilities of making a trade. And you know I know that the Houston Rockets have been a shark in the water, trying to find a way to get Kevin Durant. And of course, he has relationship with both head coach Ime Udoka during their days working together in Brooklyn, and of course Royal Ivey being an assistant coach with the Houston Rockets as well. He's actually Kevin Durant's best friend. He was in Royal Ivy's wedding, and he is Royal Ivy's daughter's godfather. So there's relationship there. Them both coming from Texas, being Longhorns, and all of that stuff. So it's very fluid. There's no conversation obviously right now. The season is still going on, but these are conversations that will linger into the off season.
What do you think about like just the feelings and the narrative around, you know, Kevin Durant and what kind of team he needs to be on or can be successful with? Like what do you what, and even looking at a couple of the teams kind of floating out there, you mentioned Mavericks and Rockets from your reporting on scoopb.com, which was really insightful. I didn't even know Royal Ivy was an assistant on the staff until I read your reporting. And that stuff certainly does matter. I didn't think about the Ime Udoka connection. What do you feel like makes sense at this point for Kevin Durant? Not even just for a specific team, but just in general, like the way people and like I'm not as into like the way people talk about him and the narrative and stuff, but I'm just like I would love to see him in a situation. I know people say like they don't think he's happy and all that. It's like, I mean, I don't need to go psychology on it. But I do. I think it would be dope to see him in a good, healthy situation, where he can hoop, be himself, and have a chance to compete to finish his career.
In my reporting, and it's again fluid, as much as we talk about the Rockets and as much as we talk about Dallas, a lot can change. For one, Dallas is players pay attention to ownership and their logic and more. Kyrie has an option. If he opts in, eh, he won't play until sometime, maybe this time next year. Depending on, I don't want to speak for him, but you just don't know. Anthony Davis and that situation, it sounded good a few weeks ago. Anthony Davis, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant being teammates, and Kyrie getting hurt changes everything. And oh yeah, Klay Thompson is there also. But I think in answer to your question, where would Kevin Durant fit? I think being around a mix of veteran and young energy. While Houston makes sense, there's other teams that stand out to me.
There's one on my mind
Two
that
on
that
outside of those.
outside of I look at and think about Minnesota. We talked about Anthony Edwards last time you were on, and I told you my belief that the Minnesota curse is going to happen eventually. He's gonna want or deserve some other high level, star level player to play alongside that can support him, that can alleviate him. And I mean, who better to target than his childhood hero, who he just loves to death. And in terms of the fit, I think that would work. I think that'd be great for KD to team up with a younger superstar who can kind of take more of the heavy load and he can kind of do his thing. I think that could be a legitimate swing for Minnesota if they're willing to give up, a bunch of guys, be like, hey, we just want to pair like KD. Do you want to come play with Ant? Like, I think that might be a solid pitch.
So I'll take that and raise you this. And you, I don't know if you remember last year. Um, I had reported that the New York Knicks were open to having conversations with other teams about the services of Julius Randle. And people were kind of looking at me like, huh? And mad. And then Julius Randle got hurt and then he sat out the rest of the season. Do you remember that whole exchange? Okay.
Yep.
So the thought process from folks on the Knicks side was get him another all-star appearance, showcase him and see what he can do. And we don't want to pay him. Let's see if we can move him to someone somewhere else. That was directly um, from a very reliable source within the Knicks organization um, that shared that. And you saw, I feel like in that vein, when you look at Minnesota, I see similar showcasing
Mm,
with Randall. Um,
mm.
I think that it would be smart, but I also think that Minnesota wants to rewrite history because history has not been kind to that organization. I mean, we're talking Kevin Garnett getting a deal, Tom Gugliotta wanting money, and Stephon wanting money, and then Stephon ultimately getting traded to the New Jersey Nets in the 90s, late 90s. Then you saw in 2004, Minnesota's heart was broken when they made it all the way with KG's MVP season, and then the Lakers ended up going to the finals and then losing to the Detroit Pistons. And then you see Anthony Edwards and Carl Anthony Towns and all those guys. The Timberwolves were in fact busy, and they got to the playoffs, and then it didn't happen the way that it was supposed to. Dallas had other plans. So I think Minnesota wants to rewrite the story and should legitimately. Um, I think Minnesota would be a great place for um, Kevin Durant, but I also think there are two other teams not named Houston, not named Dallas, that I think KD would fit perfectly. I think KD's game fits any system.
Yeah.
And teams to me, I'll start with the San Antonio Spurs.
Ooh.
I know that in the offseason, um, Brandon Ingram was on San Antonio's list of guys that they wanted. And, at the time he was a member of the Pelicans, and there was just a lot of, will he get his money and is he happy? And ultimately, you've seen what the Pelicans have become. I'm not comparing KD and I'm not comparing Ingram, but their skill sets are compared. Uh, he played basketball in the state of Texas as a college student, and I have been keenly aware of what San Antonio has been building. If you go back to my reporting as far back as January, when I reported that Chris Paul would not mind playing alongside DeAndre Ayton, so my face card doesn't decline. That being said, I know San Antonio is still looking to build. And I think San Antonio would be a great place for Kevin Durant to flourish. That's one of the teams.
Okay.
The other team, not named Dallas, not named Houston, that I think Kevin Durant would flourish. You ready? The Oklahoma City Thunder.
I love it. I love it. I love that one. I love that conversation. That's full circle. That's perfect fit. And I mean, look at the three teams that you and I just kind of mentioned, floated out the top of our heads outside of Houston and Dallas. Minnesota, young superstar. San Antonio, young superstar. OKC, young superstar. And I mean, they're kind of all over. So I mean, it's not like they're everywhere, but I mean, but when you think about that kind of fit, that's why I brought that up before, because it's like it would be nice to see him with with a young upcoming star like that. Wemby's probably sounds the most fascinating to me just on length. Like, I mean, good Lord, what would that even look like? But the OKC story, I mean, that would be the best story by far, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Kevin Durant will be another one of those players like LeBron that'll play into his 40s. I think it's written in the cards as long as he stays healthy. Um, I know that the Spurs, and I know how they move around, and just um, a lot of those guys on that team are friends from somewhere. And I think that San Antonio is a team that you should be paying attention to. Um, in addition to the other teams that I reported, and the real reason why is because I think Victor Wembanyama is believed to be the next, or one of the faces of the league. And I think as you get older, you want to be around that. I think, you know, Kevin Durant has put a lot of wear and tear on his body, and Phoenix is pleased with his production as a whole. That's one guy whose name never comes up as a negative. It's always a positive.
Hmm.
Bradley Beal has to figure his situation out. I can tell you that Milwaukee was lurking a lot at the deadline. Whether that was finding a way to get Jimmy Butler, yes, and also Phoenix trying to figure out this no trade clause situation with Bradley Beal with no avail. But I do know that ultimately for Kevin Durant, um, I think that you have to move Miami aside. I think they're figuring some things out, but I think Houston, Dallas, Oklahoma, and San Antonio are the teams that I think legitimately, both from having assets to move, uh, attractive skill set of players to move, and just a lifestyle that is matching of Kevin Durant. He doesn't need New York. He doesn't need San Francisco. He did that already.
Let's talk about Steph real quick. The GOAT kind of conversation came up. Somebody, I think it was Shaq, said like, we need to start putting him in the GOAT conversation. I was going to talk about this on my show on a solo episode. I still might kind of go more in depth on it, but I want to share it here first with you. You know what I think is really the main thing, and I think a lot of people miss this, Brandon. I mean, people who know the game and who watch, they know that he does this, but I want you to really think about this. This is why Steph has made it so hard for players like James Harden, even Luca to an extent, maybe SGA at some point, um, ball dominant players. Even he took away some of LeBron's thunder. I mean, literally took titles from him, right? Um, Steph created he was able to cultivate a style of play within his team that is predicated on genuine unselfishness and off-ball movement. The Warriors at their best, they got that ball popping system similar to what the Spurs had, but what the Spurs didn't have was a Steph Curry who, once we get our few passes, bop, 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 and then Steph comes off the curl or comes off the pin down, or just randomly anywhere you throw him the ball, he'll just turn and shoot. The Spurs didn't have someone like that. So yeah, it's the shooting, but when you think of Steph's style of play, what he really to me has done to help change the game is putting more of the onus on off-ball movement. And look at some of his contemporaries that didn't win championships during his era, right? And of course, other factors come into play. The Warriors did the right thing, built around him. He got Clay, Draymond, like the right thing, was built around him. But it was still up to him, and he was still the guy at 6'3". We talked about SGA earlier. He's 6'6". We talked about, but the thing about Steph that made him different, it's the conditioning and the movement. If you've ever seen clips of Steph when he does his Under Armour camps, when he's working with young players, the number one thing I hear him always stressing talking to young players is when you get the ball, you have zero point 0.2 seconds to make a decision. He believes it, and I resonate with this because I played this style a lot in my career, middle school, high school. I was a skinny, fast shooting player who could beat taller, bigger players because I was just faster and I could shoot over them. And I was a good shooter. And I learned how to play around guys and how to play with the pass, play fast, not have to rely on strength and athleticism. So I resonated with Steph a lot in that style of play. But I'm telling you, Brandon, that to me, that's the biggest thing with Steph's legacy because it's a culture of unselfishness, moving off the ball. Like you don't when you think of Steph, of course you think of shooting, but guess what? You're not thinking of the dribble moves. You think of James Harden, you think of cutting people up on the ball, on the ball. Even Jalen Brunson, we just talked about Brunson, heavy on the ball, and these are great players. I love all these players, but what Steph mastered and tapped into, the way he changed it was the movement. Give it up, move, get it back. Constant movement. And that's lost a lot in the game of basketball today. A lot of players don't know how to really play that way. And it's tough to do, especially to have five guys who know how to move with each other because it's a rhythm. All five guys kind of have to be on a chord. Um, but man, to me, when I think of Steph as a GOAT, as one of the greatest, to me, that's how he's really changed the game. And he's made it tough on his peers because of that.
In an era of basketball in the last 15 years where LeBron has his place, Kobe has his place, Tim Duncan has had his place, Steph Curry has also established his face and space in a road runner on Looney Tunes sort of way. We've seen this before. In the 90s and the 2000s, while everybody was paying attention to Michael, everybody was paying attention to Allen Iverson, and in between David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, Shaq were doing their thing. You know who's always been the GOAT, but it's been understated in the same way that Steph Curry is the GOAT of this generation, a GOAT in this generation. You know who that is? Hakeem Olajuwon.
Ooh, okay. I like it.
Hakeem Olajuwon's contribution to basketball as a center birthed hybrid centers
Mm,
today's generation who can face up, bend, move,
mm,
take, draw the double team, kick out from the double team, and do damage. And I feel like the fact that there's a level of mystique to Steph Curry, winning extinguishes that fire in a way that it didn't the same way for Hakeem Olajuwon. Because people often look at Hakeem and say, well, the Rockets won those two championships when Michael retired. But I'll tell you where Hakeem still is relevant. When Maurice Stoudemire was calling him, when Kobe was calling him, when LeBron was calling him, and the Houston Rockets got smart and hired Hakeem Olajuwon as a Rockets employee, so he didn't have to give away or get paid to give out all the secrets to the sauce. And I think history has a way of cementing where people lie in the same way that I think Hakeem Olajuwon gets his flowers from basketball purists. And I think that that GOAT conversation has always been a man-made conversation and it keeps people talking. And I think that's probably the only other difference between Hakeem's GOAT status in his realm
mm.
and Curry's GOAT status in his realm. And I think as time goes on, people's attention spans get interesting. I say that because I know when me and you were coming up, we all looked at Michael, we all looked at Kobe, and we thought greatness. We all respect Magic, but I feel like as time went on, we respected Magic for his business acumen in some circles. But our parents knew the significance of what Magic Johnson did, and you saw what Magic Johnson's legacy was, and how you're seeing guys like Draymond Green and LeBron James and even Luka Doncic play as big guards. That's the standard in the NBA. And I think that in this realm of basketball, you can have more than one GOAT. Like, I always take this back to a conversation that Shaq had with me on Scoopy Radio 5 years ago when we were all on lockdown during the quarantine. He said to me, when you go to McDonald's, there's multiple things on the menu. We all acknowledge the Big Mac as the sandwich of all sandwiches on the menu. But maybe everybody doesn't want a Big Mac. Maybe some people want chicken McNuggets. Maybe some people want filet of fish. It's Lent time, so filet of fish is a good thing to have on Friday. Some people may want the double quarter pounder. Some people may just want fries. Some people may just want a McFlurry. Ultimately, we have the discernment and the experience to have multiple things on the menu to pick from. You can enjoy the longevity of both LeBron and Kevin Durant. You can enjoy the youthfulness that is John Morant, as well as uh, Jason Tatum, but you could also like the fieriness that is Joe Mazzulla. 10, 15 years from now, do we look at the outlandish takes or just the level of stoicism that Joe Mazzulla has and compare it to Greg Popovich in San Antonio? Basketball evolves. And so I think when you make the analysis of the San Antonio Spurs, I've had that conversation with Draymond Green where I shared with him that I believe that the Warriors are the modern day Spurs. They just find a way to retool and still find their way to make deep playoff runs. They're not going to hit you every year with a deep playoff run, but then some years they win it, some years they don't. I think San Antonio and Golden State kind of are mirroring each other as the old school YMCA team that's taking out them young guys that think they can take the older guys. I think that's where we are in basketball right now.
Yeah, and I attribute a lot of that to again the way that it's the way they play basketball. It's why the Spurs were able, an old Manu and Tony and Tim, not in their prime. They had Kawhi's help and other good players' help, but it's why they were able to hang with D Wade and LeBron in their prime. They just played the game a certain way. It's the YMCA style. It's the the traditional style, the whatever you want to call it. But it's we can all kind of group it into just an umbrella of good basketball. So when you know good basketball, you see it. They just play good basketball. And when you play good basketball, you give yourself a chance. I have a friend who is a LeBron fan. He knows me as a Kobe Mike fan. I used to be more of an active LeBron, in my younger years when I was, just immature and social media just come out. So I would be in arguments with LeBron fans almost every day as a Kobe fan. And I've since given up that part of my life. Of course, now I'm just, I meditate now. So now I can, I embrace everything. But my LeBron fan friend has not coerced me, but he's convinced me. I'm at the place comfortably now where I can say the GOAT has three heads for me. It's Mike, Kobe, LeBron. I mean, to me, the GOAT has three heads, and it can be it's still Kareem for some people. It can still be Magic for some other people, and I agree with you. Like it's just that, it's a petty little debate people like to have and stuff. And, obviously we have numbers and stats to go off of to try to make arguments. But I think all in all things considered, from what I've seen my lifetime, Mike, Kobe, LeBron, the GOAT has three heads for me now. I'm comfortable saying that. I would never admit that 15, 20 years ago, but I'm at the place now where I can. Um, and then well, you mentioned Hakeem. I love how you brought that up because the whole dynamic with unselfishness, passing, movement, it also, you bring up Hakeem, I'm glad you brought up a big. To me, it now manifests in the parallel between Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic. I think that's what you're seeing. I think one guy catches it, and one guy is a great, amazing scorer. They both score the ball. They can both make plays. They both rebound. But one guy is known for catching and holding, scoring the ball, inside, outside, three. Like, Joel, I mean, his offensive skill set is incredible, mainly as a scorer. Jokic is over here getting 30, 20, and 20. So how can you compare? So and now, I mean, Jokic is past Embiid now. That whole Jokic versus Embiid thing is done now. Unfortunately, Embiid's injuries aren't helping his case, of course. Compared with Jokic having success, multiple MVPs, he's got a championship. I mean, and I just think people miss that a lot when you look at, the way the game is being played by some of these guys, in counter to how some other guys play the game. And in all, you can embrace and love different, the different styles, but the ones that are successful, you got to kind of take note of that.
So it's interesting you bring this up, and you know this well. A few years ago, you were with me when I did a one-on-one interview with multiple-time NBA champion Ray Allen out in Charlotte, and he talked about Klay Thompson. And I'll tie this into what we're talking about. And I'm quoting him. He said, I've always talking about Klay Thompson. Ray Allen said, I've always been impressed with him. I always thought that he was one of the best players in the league. He mirrors kind of the way that I played. And then as the conversation went on, Ray Allen talked about the big man position. And he talked about how he felt that at some point, um, the center position was going to evolve once again, because of the fact that nothing is new under the sun. And so you'll have more hybrid guys. Um, I think that what he said was very much a self-fulfilling prophecy. Um,
Yeah, I
and I
remember that too. I do remember him saying that.
and he talked about the Aitons of the world, which ultimately forecasted the Jokic's. My phone died, so I can't read you the quote word for word, but you look at the Joel Embiid's, the Jokic's, even the Yusuf Nurkic's, and even the Domantas Sabonis's. You're seeing how big men are picking up a lot of different things from the guards, even the Karl Anthony Townses.
Yeah.
Karl to me has always been a combination of a 3, 4, and 5, but playing in the tip system, he's more of a 4 or 5 now. But you see him get to the bucket at ease and him creating those mismatches. And I think that that was the self-fulfilling prophecy of what Ray Allen talked about in that interview some years ago, and you're seeing it in real time now. So I do think that, however you look at the GOAT conversation, whether I also think there's another layer to it that other than Shaq, centers don't really sell shoes.
Mm.
Speak of centers were that they were clumsy, that they were kind of boring, that they weren't entertaining. Jokic's awkwardness is what makes him him. Joel Embiid being a smartass, you see that his level of candor, you see that more in boxing, or you see that more in guards than you do
Mm.
someone in his position. Someone like Draymond, he plays bigger than what he is. You saw that more with the Oakleys and Anthony Masons and Charles Barkley's. I think you're seeing a lot of these storylines and a lot of these different characterizations play out in a modern era. And I think, again, I go back to a conversation you and I had some time ago about the passing of the torch. I think you're seeing the passing of the torch in real time. In 2014, 11 years ago, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, James Harden were all looking to Joe Johnson, Joakim Noah, LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony as the elder statesman. Now in 2025, you got the John Morants, the Anthony Edwardses, the Luka Doncic players, all those guys looking at LeBron and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry as the OGs that Clay and Steph and Kevin Durant look to LeBron and Carmelo as being 11 years ago. You're seeing a shift, but you're also seeing how the European game has caught up. And I really believe that in 2004, the USA basketball team blowing it and being a bronze medal team really set the standard that they can't just live off the laurels of what the dream team was. They got to compete. And at the same time, the other countries had the same idea. And now you're seeing the impact of Dirk Nowitzki's game. You're seeing the impact of Sarunas Marciulionis' game. You're seeing Andre Kirilenko. You're seeing Tony Kukoc. All these different guys, Arvydas Sabonis, that influence the European game, Drazen Petrovic, and they're making it their own.
I think that has an influence too on this era of Steph and what he's been able to do and how he I think the timing of his ascension has really aligned well with and of course he's been part of it. He's been a big part of it himself, but I think where basketball has gone really ended up fitting so well with the way that he was playing the game. He's been doing it his whole career. We saw him do it at Davidson. His little kids just running around hitting threes. It's like, yo, they just can't stop this. It's infectious. It's again, it's the shooting is like the what, but like the how is what makes it so fascinating. The guy just he moves. It's that spirit of movement, man. Clay has the same thing. When you're a movement guy and other guys commit to movement with you, that's where basketball is at its best, in my opinion.
No, sir.
Michael, Kobe, LeBron, they weren't those kind of guys. They caught the ball. They dictate. They have the ball. They look over. These are 6'6", 6'9". Steph he really is one of one. He's an anomaly, not just because of the shooting. It's the way, it's the how.
I heard Chris Rock say this years ago, and while it was funny, I'll add more context to it because I don't want to get slapped. Um, Chris Rock said that Steph Curry plays like Allen Iverson with a father in the home.
I do remember that line.
And you think about that while there was hyperbole and jokes with that, Steph Curry is a combination of Iverson meets Reggie Miller.
Yeah,
Um, and I'll add another portion to that, which may be a bit redundant. Rip Hamilton moving without the basketball.
there you go.
More so Detroit Rip Hamilton than Washington Wizards Rip Hamilton. More UConn Rip Hamilton. Steph Curry had to create his own because there was a logjam of being a premier swingman. Everybody wanted to be tall and cross over and get to the basket. And it's interesting that that's how Kobe was playing, and he tore his Achilles against the Warriors. I thought that was such an interesting seminal moment as we were passing the torch in that way of who was the alpha. We just assumed that when Kobe was retiring, that was LeBron's league. And I think in 2015, the world, including myself, was surprised when the Warriors beat the Cavs in the finals. And then 2016, the Cavs got it back. And then it was this back and forth from 2017, 2018, and more. Then you kind of broke it up in 2019 with the Warriors and the Raptors competing against the Warriors and Kevin Durant being hurt and the Raptors winning it, and then you saw other teams go about it. But that LeBron, Steph Curry, the Warriors, and whatever team LeBron was on era, you really saw that ushering in, even down to big men like Dwight Howard advancing his game, his shot selection, Brook Lopez moving further out. You kind of saw that earlier, where you saw guys like Zydrunas Ilgauskas extend his
Sure,
shooting range. But
sure.
overall, Steph Curry and the jump shot playing alongside Klay Thompson, you really saw everyone taking shots, but you also saw Jimmy Butler and DeMar DeRozan's mid range kind of revolt
Yeah,
with the Warrior style of basketball at the same time.
great point. Which is what's so cool about seeing Jimmy. One of the cool things I loved about that move is that he's not a Clay. He's not a movement shooter. He's not a 3-point guy. He's just an everything guy, and that's why it felt like that was just going to be so perfect for them. Brandon Scoop B. Robinson, the man, scoopb.com. Good to have you, man. Thanks for spending some time with me talking some basketball. Appreciate you.
The opportunity to be myself.
Always love, bro.